Sanibonani Dumelang, good evening and welcome to episode 257 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamantungwa Kumalo. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to it. You're tuned into the only daily property talk show in South Africa. And of course, to all of you at home who are joining us as usual, you know how we do it every single weekday at 7 p.m. You and I have an appointment where I'm always in conversation with an expert who helps us navigate our property decisions. Now, yesterday I wasn't on the show. I was a bit under the weather, had to go to the dentist. I'm still in a little bit of pain, but I thought, you know what? I cannot miss this evening's episode. And of course, spending my evening with all of you at home. Thank you very much to St. Clarkson, who held it down yesterday. She was in conversation with Echo Quagre. And if you missed that episode, then do go to our Facebook or our YouTube channel to catch up on that episode. And what you're going to find on Facebook and YouTube are also other great episodes that you have missed out on. We've got over 200 episodes talking all things relating to property. And it doesn't matter whether you are a tenant, a landlord, you're looking to buy, to sell, or even build. This is the Property Podcast that helps you on your journey. And of course, because in private property, we do not only speak about residential property or even commercial property, because we sometimes touch on commercial property. We also look at other aspects of property. And I am, of course, talking about the Home Shoppers Show that you can look forward to every Monday and Friday, where Chad brings you and certainly profiles incredible properties that you can find on our website. That's www.privateproperty.co.za. And you'll also be able to find that on our social media platforms, you're able to find the award-winning farmer, Umbali Nwoko, who brings you the farming podcast every Tuesdays and Thursdays. And that's a great show, I think, for all of you at home who are interested in agriculture or certainly have an interest in having a better understanding in the agricultural value chain. That is a show you want to make sure that you tune into. And the lady who held it down for me yesterday evening, St. Clarkson, brings you the First Time Home Buyer Show every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. Those are the great shows that you can tune into across our social media pages every single weekday at 8 p.m. And of course, do make sure that you follow us across our social media pages on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, and we're now also on TikTok. You can follow myself on Instagram at Zamantungwa_K as well as on Twitter. Well, this evening we're looking at something that I know many of us at home are affected by. We're looking at considering moving your business into your home. Here are some key considerations. I know with many of us working from home, and certainly a lot of businesses have been started during this pandemic. Often a lot of people are now running, their businesses from home, or some, of course, working from home. So we want to have a look at what are some of the key things that you need to consider before you move your business from home, or if you've already made that transition. What should you be aware of? Now, I know that as you're watching, you're seeing a few technical glitches on your screen. Do not worry. That's probably because, I've got slightly bad reception that our team behind the scenes is trying to make sure they deal with as efficiently as possible, so you can still hear us loud and clear and see us loud and clear throughout our conversation. Well, of course, I want to hear from you at home. If you have started a business, particularly during this lockdown, that you are running from home, and how has that experience been like? And I'm particularly interested in people who are running it, living in community schemes, because I know how contentious community scheme living can be, especially with the different rules that are in those respective community schemes. So are you running a business, or did you start a business during lockdown? How was the experience? And share with us if you are living in a community scheme as you run that business. Now, to help us better understand what are the key considerations if we are looking at moving our business into our home, I'm joined this evening by Marina, Constas, who's a director at BBM Attorneys. Marina, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Zama. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I think we're going to have a lot of fun tonight because this is such a hot topic.
We definitely are, Marina. I mean, we've been chatting offline, and this certainly is such a great topic because we've seen a boom in a number of new businesses during this pandemic, which of course speaks to certainly the resilience of different entrepreneurs. I mean, with some of them, they were sort of plucked into entrepreneurship because of retrenchments in their homes. With some, it was a matter of, look, I'm seeing a gap because of, lockdown. I think I can do a great job in filling it. So there's different combinations of why people have ventured into business during this lockdown in particular. And one of the things that we're aware of when you're starting a business is, of course, you want to keep your business expenses as low as possible. And one of the ways you do that is by not renting out space. And if possible, you're running your business and bootstrapping and running it from your home. I want first, Marina, for you to just paint a picture of what the thinking process should be when we are exploring moving our business to our homes. And I mean, we can split it from somebody who's just about to start a venture to somebody who probably did have rental space somewhere and now is looking at, cutting down those costs and thinking, you know what, maybe let me move this to my home.
Well, I think, Zama, the first thing is that we need to look at and distinguish between working from home and actually running a business from home. So when you're working from home, I mean, we all know the drill, and COVID has necessitated that many of us, particularly working at large institutions or banks, work from home. And that's all very well and good because you have your computer, you have a head office which is away from your home, and you're basically not causing any trouble to anybody, and that's all very well and good. But when it comes time to actually run your business from home and use your home as the base, so all your infrastructure, everything that you need is at home, then there are different considerations. So let's take, for example, the sectional title scheme, because there you managed and run by the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act. That act is really quite clear. It says that if you want to change the purpose for which the sectional title plans are designated in that scheme, so a sectional title scheme would essentially be residential, then what you would need to do is get the written consent of every single owner, that's in writing, to the change of purpose. If an owner feels that people are not giving the consent, the requisite consent, then they can, and they feel that the owners are being unfair or inequitable, unjust, there's prejudice, they can go straight to the community scheme ombud to ask for the ombud to substitute that decision. So the act is clear, and that's a section. I mean, that's parliamentary, so you can't change that rule or amend it. So that's the sectional title side. But then what about the municipal side? We can speak about the municipal side, and that's really important because you can get as much permission as you want from trustees or directors of homeowners associations to run your business from home. But if you're not getting that consent from council, then you can't do it. So you need both consents from the body corporate or the community scheme and the council. And if we go through and we look at the municipal bylaws and things like that, some businesses you simply can't run, full stop. So you're not entitled to run a spray paint business or a car sales business, a tavern or a restaurant. If you want to run doctors' rooms, for example, from your unit, you need to have proper parking. I mean, the municipality have got some really strict bylaws, and ultimately, every municipality is different. So you might have something in Ekurhuleni, which is different from the Western Cape. You'll have to check out your bylaws. Also, you're not allowed to use more than a percentage of your square meterage for business purposes of your unit. In some municipalities, that's 10%. In some municipalities, it's 20%. If you're an owner and you want to run your business from home, you must be the one who's running that business from home. So you can't, go off to work and get your buddy to run your business for you at home. So I think you need to really, really strictly consider what it is that you want to do.
I'm this evening in conversation with Marina Constas, who's the director at BBM Attorneys, and we're looking at what are some of the key considerations if you're considering moving your business into your home. Now, we are going to be taking your questions and comments shortly. I want to hear from you at home if you started a business during lockdown, perhaps even pre-lockdown. And have you decided to move that business to your home? How was that transition like? And I'm particularly interested to hear from people who are operating from community schemes. What was the reception like from the rest of the members Did you even alert them? Marina is shedding light into how you can go about making sure that you operate a business. Now, Marina, I actually want us to then look at, because you touched so nicely on how there's certainly certain businesses that you simply aren't able to run, particularly from a community, scheme. And what I want to find out from you then is, how do we deal with the contentious matter of, suppose you are somebody who wanted to do, let's say, a hairdresser, right? And you're not one of those ones who are going to be mobile. Perhaps you're thinking people must just come to your unit, and you're living in a community scheme, and they'll come in, you'll do their hair and they leave, perhaps even do their nails and they leave, versus somebody who does start a business as opposed to working from home. So the scenario is for both businesses. Somebody who's starting a business and they're able to essentially just work virtually in the same way many of us have been able to just work virtually. Nobody's coming in and out, and essentially nobody even knows that you are running your business from your property. How do we then deal with those? Because I'm sure the person who wants to bring somebody physically into their home will argue that, well, all of you are in your homes. Granted, some people are just working from home, so you're a full-time employee, but there's certainly people who are running their businesses from your homes, and you're able to do it. It's just that the nature of your business is such that you don't need people coming in and out. And they'd argue, well, surely I should also be able to then go on and run my business. How do we deal with that? Because I can imagine there are viewers at home who've probably been in that very same situation. And we all know that many people are either working from home or certainly running their businesses from home. So how do we then deal with the, I'll say, contentious issue of the nature of the business that somebody would ideally then be going into?
Well, I think, Zama, we got rules that we can rely on. So any body corporate or homeowners association can actually put rules in place which either prohibit commercial use within the schemes or allow it under certain circumstances. So very recently, I had a very large homeowners association from the Four Ways area here in Gauteng approach me, and all the directors were saying to me, look, this is an onslaught. We're going to get requests for people to run businesses. We already have, and we need to look at clever ways of allowing these things without disturbing the peace of the complex or disturbing the aesthetics or the harmonious nature of the scheme. And you're 100% right. I mean, you can have an auditor who's sitting there doing his books and has been doing it for many years from a complex, nobody would know. Or you could have a recruitment agency where cars are coming in and out, up and down every day with people being interviewed. We had a case of a bakery where a lady was baking cakes and bringing vans in every day, and the cakes were leaving the complex. And she was saying, but what's the problem? You've got such beautiful smells wafting around the complex. It shouldn't be an issue. The whole story is, what impact is your business having on the rest of the scheme, isn't it? I mean, what prejudice are you causing? Is the gate opening and closing all the time? Is there wear and tear on facilities in the complex? Is it a security issue? Are there too many strange people coming in? So when I was an arbitrator a couple of years ago, and these things came across my desk, you would need to utilize your discretion to see, and I know the community scheme ombud also utilizes discretion to see what is the impact going to be on the complex. You spoke about the hairdressing salon. There was a case called the Vanilla Street Homeowners Association versus Ishmael. And Ishmael had wanted to open up a hairdressing salon, which he actually did. There were rules in place which were reasonable, which prohibited businesses of that nature because of the extra water, people coming in and out. You couldn't control things. It was a busy hairdressing salon. And what happened is she lost her case, and the complex upheld their rules. So I think if it's properly worded and it's in your rules, and the trustees or the directors or homeowners associations have really put thought into those rules and properly considered them, then I think any court would very much uphold those rules, because the rules are created by the complex. So, it's a democracy rules, really.
We are this evening exploring key considerations that you need to be aware of in the event where you are looking at, moving your business into your home. And, Marina, as you were talking about the rules, we were even saying this off air that this evening I was in a special AGM in one of the properties where I own, and unfortunately we didn't meet quorum. But one of the agenda items for that special meeting is the changing of the rules. Also just looking at making sure that the rules are adequately updated and we are aware of even the times that we're living in. I think one of the big things, and I see it's even come up in one of our comments, I'm going to go through them shortly, is around noise and children in the complex, and just young children being unattended. And on the one hand, while I deeply sympathize with parents, particularly during this lockdown. We've all been in our homes, and your children are also in their home. And I'm sure children are just not used to being at home. So it's difficult for them to understand why we now, doing homeschooling, we're at home all the time. And so they go out in the complex, this particular property, that particular community scheme doesn't have a separate children's area. So kids would then be playing in the parking lot, and sometimes essentially damaging people's cars and making quite a lot of noise. They're unattended. And I think we've probably, in the space of the past 2-3 months, have had a number of emails from the managing agent just about children who are unattended. So that is something that we need to be on top of, and just making sure that holistically rules are updated, and that we're all aware of what the rules say. Because sometimes you're probably breaking rules and you get emails or your neighbors complain and you think, look, I'm being oppressed. Why are people saying I can't do this or can't do that? And yet actually the rules are quite clear about what you can or cannot do. Now, to go to your questions and comments at home, we've got a comment here on Facebook coming from Andrika Lekanyane saying, it's not easy to be taken seriously operating your business from home, especially as an estate agency. I would still prefer traditional office setups. The latter also makes it easy for team building, etc. And that is Andrika, of course, she runs an estate agency. And that's true, because I think, Marina, sometimes with certain businesses, when you have a home address, people don't take you seriously. I mean, I'm thinking of, for example, if you were to run perhaps a law practice, you could easily use your home address as a home address. Perhaps you ordinarily be meeting clients, not even in your house, but wherever you want to meet clients. But the moment clients sort of look at your home address and they see that, look, this is actually a complex, it might even perhaps have people be wary about the credibility of your business. I want to read another comment coming from Facebook. I love this comment. It's from Uzamile Ngomalo saying, I had the hardest time because I live in a complex, having a virtual meeting and my neighbor's kids playing and running around, having to mute and run around to shout, Umsindo, come back to continue. And you know what, Zamile, I know this all too well. I remember when we, started the show, and we started the show around, it's been over a year now, started around March. And during those times, kids would be playing, out. And when the show started, the sun was still pretty much summer. And there'd be quite a lot of noise. And before it got air, I always have to ask my colleague if they can hear the children in the complex, because I could hear them. So I would get self-conscious that if they could hear them, then you at home would essentially be hearing all the kids that are playing around and making all kinds of noise. And unfortunately, there isn't any way to sort of cancel out that noise. Now, Marina, I think one of the key things, of course, that we're picking up here is there's obviously an issue of credibility, but there's also an issue of now when we look at people who are working from home, never mind those who are running their businesses from home, they also have their own set of frustrations having to work from home, and we'll say the environment that they find themselves in. I mean, in Zamile's example, for instance, with children being loud. And I know one of the big things with noise, certainly, for example, in the complexes that I'm in, we have a time where I'll say it's relatively acceptable to have a certain amount of noise. And then only in the evenings from certain time, then you can't actually have a lot of noise. So if people are making a bit of noise during the day, one would argue that's actually, they're not breaking any of the rules. Except now, of course, things have drastically changed because we're working from home, or certainly a lot of people are working from home. home. And so you actually want the noise to also be relatively lower than normal during those working hours as well. How do we then meet each other halfway? Because technically the other parties are not breaking the rules. They're still within the relative, we'll say controlled noise level, and the kids are within their, right of making that noise in the complex, but it's disturbing, it's you're trying to work in the office. So how do we then sort of try to meet each other halfway? Because as I was saying to you earlier, one of the issues in the community scheme where we had a meeting earlier today was around kids playing around in the complex and just the damage that the children are causing. I mean, it got to a point where kids would close water tap valves and people would think that there's no running water, and a plumber would have to be called in, and so that call out fee, and now they've essentially just started charging the owners of the units where the children live, so their parents, and have said, look, if you can't guard your kids, we're going to just have to charge you, because we absolutely cannot be calling out plumbers every single time your child decides to close a valve. And people, obviously owners and residents, are unaware that it was just kids who were playing around.
Well, they say kids will be kids, but ultimately in a sectional title scheme, you've got the absolute right not to live in a sectional title scheme. So if you do, then you're going to have to make sure that you abide by the rules and regulations, but the rules need to be reasonable and have to apply consistently to everybody. So what is reasonable? I mean, we used to have rules in the old days where I used to read and actually giggle to myself, because it used to say silence must be maintained between this hour and that hour. Now, I mean, that you can't enforce that rule. I mean, what is silence? Silence is without noise at all. So when people are drafting the rules, they need to it must be reasonable, quiet must be maintained, just to make things more enforceable. Noise is quite a subjective story. And I think in my experience in the past, you've got to be able to prove that noise is objectively a problem. So what would a reasonable person think about noise nuisance? We know that the community schemes, the acts and your memorandum of incorporation in a homeowners association usually would say that, nobody could cause a nuisance to somebody else within their section, or if it's a body corporate on the exclusive use in the exclusive use area. So what is a nuisance? Well, again, if you look at the common law theories about nuisance, is every person is entitled to peaceful and undisturbed possession of their property. And I think that's where you've got to look at it and say, am I being disturbed? Is it unreasonable for somebody to be playing music loud at 11:30 or 12 o'clock? There's some people who have sensitivities to noise nuisance. Some people are sensitive to kids. They've got shrill voices, high-pitched voices, they're running around. There's certain people who, maybe should retire a little bit earlier, because you also can't keep children inside all the time. So there is a balance. And I like the way you said that, Zam. I like the way you said, where do we meet in the middle? Because it's always all about that. It's about compromise. But kids can be naughty. I mean, we had a case in Natal where the kids opened up all the petrol tanks of all the cars in the scheme. It was kids belonging to tenants, and they put sand in every single thing. So, I mean, it can cause huge damage. It might not just be noise. It can cost hundreds of thousands of rands of damage if parents are not supervising their children as well.
Marina, please indulge me. How did you go about dealing with that issue? I'm mortified, and I am absolutely mortified at that case. I'm going to get to your questions and comments shortly. We've gotten really great ones. But Marina, I'm curious, how do you then deal with that? I mean, I can't even begin to imagine the damage and having to call your insurance, explain that to insurance, who's paying for damage, who's paying for access. But it's also a matter of perhaps you just wanted a clean slate on your insurance. You don't want to be making all these kinds of claims. So in as much as you've got insurance, perhaps you're just waiting for that payback and not making a claim maybe for a year or 2 or 3 years. So how did you go about having that matter resolved, just out of curiosity?
Well, at that stage, I mean, you didn't have the community scheme ombud service, which is an umbrella body, of course, for tenants and owners, etc. So at that time, if your visitors or occupants didn't behave themselves, then you would have to go, and tenants obviously didn't behave themselves, you'd have to go straight to the owner. And that owner had a lot of tap dancing to do because there were claims. So the claims were financial. Eventually, we went into quite heavy arbitrations, but that was in terms of Management Rule 71 of the old Act. And yeah, there were some financial payments that were made over many, many months by that owner, who then recouped it from the tenants, whose children, was the tenant's kids. So the tenant landed up paying, but the owner was the one who had to pay first.
Yeah, I can't even begin to imagine that. I think this is also one of those things where, as a landlord, you need to be quite clear on also sharing the rules, but certainly now sharing the rules of the complex, and perhaps even making sure that certain clauses that you put into your lease agreement is quite explicit about damages caused for, especially if you're going to have a tenant that has children, or perhaps their visitors, and how you're going to deal with that, because you certainly do not want to have to deal with them. I know with noise, for example, Marina, is they'd obviously warn your tenant. You'd get fined. It will go into your levy statement, and you will carry that down to your tenant when you give them their invoice. But those things are things that we're now relatively aware of. But when you then think of damage that your tenant's child is potentially going to make, around the complex or to other owners or other residents, property, that's actually a whole story altogether. So that's certainly a cautionary tale for a lot of tenants who've got children, and even owners who've got children, to be very aware of how you navigate what your children are doing and not doing. I know kids will be kids, and this is certainly not kids are bad. Kids will be kids, and I think we all know this, but also want to make sure that they don't get into the kind of trouble that costs you thousands and thousands of rands worth of damages, and having to pay to other people. I want to get through your questions and comments. We've got a whole host of them. They're absolutely brilliant. We've got a question coming through from Facebook, Ulindisi Chabela, asking, what happens when there's a sudden increase of car dealerships in the same street? What are the bylaw requirements? Love that.
Well, I think every municipality has different bylaw requirements, and I think you would have to go and have a look at each one. But I mean, there would have to be bylaws regarding size, how many cars can be on a lot, how many car sales places can be within a certain meters of each other. But I know that a lot of the bylaws have been relaxed in this regard. I mean, you only need to go down a street like Jewel Street in Malvern to know that there's a car dealership on nearly every single corner. But the thing is, there's noise, there's nuisance, you've got security issues. So the bylaws should cover that, but you need to look at everyone. Everyone is different.
We've got a question, Glad. I'm not quite understanding your question. If you have time, can you just update it? It's a question on Facebook from Glad Shirinda asking, is it possible to buy a house in a real estate agency firm? I don't understand the question, Glad. So can you just specify what exactly you mean? Should we have time, we'll definitely come back to it. Let's see, I think Andrika has updated saying, are you asking if it's possible to go buy a property using an estate agency firm? So Glad, just confirm if that is the question that you're asking. So if you're asking whether it's possible to buy a property using an estate agency firm, just because didn't quite understand your question. And I see we've got a question here from Andrika, went on to say, are you asking if a property can be bought using your company instead of the property being registered in your personal capacity? So, Andrika has given you nice different iterations. So just let us know what exactly you mean by your question. Glad you're in that there. Andrika went on to us to say, in my experience as an estate manager, I've realized that a lot of owners hardly obtain consent from the HOA when operating their properties from their homes. But also, if you look at the HOA rules, they are very vague as far as this rule is concerned, and the process to be followed before a business can be operated from their home. We've got a great comment here coming through from one of our Facebook fans. It's coming from Munyaranzi David Madimba, who's saying, this is a brilliant show, smart hostess. You always cover all business interest matters. Wow. Thank you very much there, David. We really do appreciate it. Before we wrap up, I'll see if Glad's question gets clarified before we leave. But I want to find out then from you, Marina, mean, if somebody has been watching us for the past 30 minutes and they're an entrepreneur or a potential entrepreneur, and I say potential because they haven't quite started their business, they're now in the process of, perhaps launching, and they're looking at operating from home, whether they're looking at operating from, a freestanding house, because we also know that bylaws are, of course, something that they need to consider, or they're looking at operating from a sectional title community. I want to find out what is almost the one big thing or the one top of mind thing should they almost look out for first before they get too confused and too boggled down with every other thing. What's the one big thing that they just need to be aware of as they make that decision, whether to operate from home or perhaps look for different other ways of running their business in other spaces?
Well, I think the one crucial thing in any kind of community scheme is to look at the rules. So look at the rules, even if you have to chat to the directors or the trustees, try to attend a trustees meeting to see what would and wouldn't be allowed. There's no point in spending a lot of money and time and effort and getting excited about doing something if you would be stopped at the very, very, very first hurdle when it's trying to open your business. So yeah, do that first.
Well, we are going to leave it there. Marina, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Zana.
And that is Marina Constas, who's a director at BBM Attorneys. That brings us to the end of the Private Property Podcast with myself, Uzamanto Kumalo. Glad we're going to see what your comment is down here below, and I'll try to answer it for you. If it is about buying a property under the business name, Andrika I see is also commenting, so just clarify for us and we'll be in touch with you in the comments section. To all of you at home, it has been a pleasure. Do stay, of course, online. We're going to be bringing you the First Time Home Buyers Show with Esty Clarkson at 8 p.m. Until then, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.
Hi, I'm Cornita Bobs. I'm a BCom student at Stellenbosch University. I currently live in Valgevonden Estate and I absolutely love this area. Historically, Stellenbosch is known as a student town. It offers an incredibly peaceful lifestyle and the people around town are always welcoming and friendly. Because it's a small town, there's an amazing community vibe with some really authentic coffee shops and restaurants. The trees along Victoria Street create a beautiful environment to be in, and it's really cool for students passing through campus. There's some excellent boys and girls schools in the area. Our town has such a rich history, but at the same time it's really modern. and you'll find some amazing art installations all around. The sunrises and sunsets are some of the best in the world. It's the most beautiful place to call home. I've lived here for the past 5 years, and it's been an unforgettable experience. And this is my neighborhood.